Let me ask you a question. One of the main differences that I see, JR, when I'm watching AEW and I watch WWE specifically is obviously the promos in AEW are more organic and they just sound that way and they come out better. Whose idea was it, or when did it start, or when did this transition start in WWE? Because I'm assuming you were there, where they just said, okay, let's start scripting everything.
I would say, I don't think it was at the beginning of the Attitude Era, but I think somewhere subsequently to that, the writing people became more prominent. There are more of them. And so they're splitting up duties. This guy's going to write a promo for this guy. It became very compartmentalized, like we were Disney.
Right.
And Vince wants to envision himself as a Disney company. That's cool. He's making more money than anybody else, so he's doing all right. But bottom line is that the more writers they hired, the more jobs they had to find for them to do. And some of them were just writing promos and using their own personal imagination. I say that sometimes a kid that's 22 or 23 years old, and one of his first jobs out of college, who's actually never been in a fight, who's never played in an athletic contest, who's never had the shit knocked out of him, is a little bit challenging to write for somebody that's a live, living being that's standing in front of you. I'd rather, what we do is the guys will get bullet points, but basically we don't have any writers. We have zero in AEW. So what you hear, good or bad, oh, that's not a good promo. That was a good promo. It's because it's a talent deal, and I think fans like that. Carlos, is just basically the same deal, man. It's back to the old days a little bit. How many promos did you do that weren't scripted? Thousands?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I've been very lucky because the way I talk, nobody can really write for me. So they've always given me like a lot of leeway. But I'm definitely like in the one. You know what I'm saying?
You should create your own material. That's what you're doing. You guys are doing here today. You're creating content. And I think that's what you ask the talents to do. Hey, look, you get paid a good buck. You're working 1 day a week. Come on. You can't think about your promo?
Right. So, JR, let me get this right then. So back then, it's like they just randomly just started hiring a bunch of writers. And everybody's sitting back saying, like, hey, what do we need all these writers for? And they're basically saying, well, we got all these writers that need to write. And so they just said, is that how kind of it worked? They just hired them, and so because they hired them and they needed something to do, they just started writing the promos?
It seemed like that the guys were, after Russo and Ferrara left, that's when the proliferation of the influx of writers came to be. And they all got assigned different tasks. This one's going to work on Raw, this one's going to work on SmackDown. So now once you get to your brand, what are you going to do? Well, you're not going to be the booker. Even though they try to be booking, they try to come up with booking ideas. So you got to take the existing booking that's been created and then make promos for it and help these guys as best you can. So that's how that came about, Disco. It was just crazy stuff. And it made everybody feel like we were a big entertainment company, and it's trying to leave the wrestling company aspect farther and farther behind. And I thought that was a mistake because you can't leave your core product, man. You can't.
Well, let me tell you what I feel like I get. And tell me if you get this feeling too. It's because they put, like you described the typical writer, 22, 23-year-old kid, first job, he's never been in a fight, hasn't slept with a lot of girls and stuff. But what I always got out of this when they started scripting the promos, because most of the writers and like half the guys in the business these days are huge comic book marks. The conversations that the wrestlers were having were conversations that you'd read like comic book characters having. Like comic book characters are not real people; they're comic book characters. So it's like I always got that vibe. I was like, boy, I bet you all these guys are comic book marks. This is what the show sounds like. Do you get that feeling?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes. I feel bad for the talent more than anything. Yeah. I don't get angry at the writers for trying to do their job. They got hired to do something they weren't qualified to do. Sometimes we've all been there, I guess, in our lifetimes. But I felt bad for the talents. I see the gleam in the talent's eye when they get a promo on AEW because they can create something. They can have a hand in their future. They can have a hand in the building their persona. At any time, anybody, every smart booker I ever worked for, including and starting with Cowboy Bill Watts, when he hired talent, he always wanted to make sure when he hired top talent that they knew they were coming in and they were going to help book their program. Because anytime a guy's got some of his own skin in the game, he's going to work hard to make it work. Plus, they tell you what they can do. They know what they do best. And so to me, it was just a natural progression of how Watts did it. And now we're doing it. Tony Khan's been very influenced by Bill Watts and other NWA and old school wrestling. So now we're kind of back in that world.
Bro, and it's kind of funny, Jim, because I kind of work that way also. I find out who are my good talkers. I don't got to write nothing for them, okay?
Right.
These guys don't talk that well. I got to help them talk. These guys are real smart. Give me an idea that you want to do. So now they feel like something isn't being forced upon them, and they're more open to everything because it's their idea. But one of the problems that we have is that, and you've seen this, Jim, is a lot of bookers. They're afraid that if the idea isn't theirs and somebody else is going to get a credit, and they're afraid for their job. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So they don't want any ideas to come through if it isn't theirs, or they'll steal it.
Rampant insecurity and paranoia has been in my psyche since 1974 when I first walked into a pro wrestling locker room. Who's that guy? Who's the new kid? What's that? You know, that's the other referee. Is he taking your spot? You know, paranoia. And
or how about this one, Jim? When you go backstage to visit your friends, he's probably here trying to get a job. No.
Yeah.
People. Yeah.
Let me tell you something, because I've worked another job since I've been out of wrestling, right? And I always used to say that there's two people in the business, the ones that want to do their job and the ones that want to keep their job. And I always thought that was just like professional wrestling until I got another job. And there's like, in my job, there's people that want to do their job and people that want to keep their job. And it's like, I think it's just like human nature. And we see it on that, like in professional wrestling, we see it on that level that guys would rather that, just try to save their spot. And it's it's that the attitude amongst the top guys produced some good business back in the day, where guys were very trying to get more and trying to get more. But like these days, when it's like we're kind of like all this together and we got to figure out how to get like the wrestling popularity back up to where it used to be, we got to change our philosophy. I mean, did you listen to Chael Sonnen's rant recently on Raw that he had?
No.
Okay.
I like Chael though. I heard
it was great, bro.
I do too. And let me give you a point what he said. And you tell me if this is a problem that you see. I know it's a problem that you see because it's a problem I see. And anybody that's been in the business when we were successful and heard the crowds back in the day and the crowds today, that's different. But what we have today is when you have two guys cutting a promo and they're and you want to put across like there's going to be violence, and then they're going in the ring and they're not fighting. They're performing, like two guys. And I think that we see that it's very difficult to sell feuds to people if the wrestlers are just going to go out there and just you see it more often than not. People can't punch anymore. We used to get mileage out of a punch and a bump, and stuff. And the guys Austin and Brett would brawl. Rock and Austin would brawl. Carter, they'd be brawling. It's like we've taken that element out. And I honestly think that the fact that all the matches are scripted from head to toe, even though the promos aren't scripted, the matches, everybody in the business scripts their match today, that we've taken a lot of the called in the ring stuff, a lot of the organic stuff, a lot of the basics, we've taken that out and replaced it with trying to fit 24 ounces into a 12-ounce can each match, and just all these kickouts of all these false finishes and all these devastating moves. I think when people try to engage in this product that used to watch it, it's just too busy for them. It's like it's not a simple product anymore with good guy versus bad guy, heel versus baby fight. Every match is like complicated, all these spots and dives and stuff, and you try to call it. It's like it's hard to call a match these days. It's constant action where guys aren't slowing down and like you go. I mean, people say like, "Oh, rest holds are boring." It's like, yeah, but that's 15 seconds where the announcer can talk about you.
They're afraid
about your character. It's like
talents are afraid to slow down, Disco. They're afraid to slow down because they goddamn can't work well. They have no confidence. They can't slow down. I'm afraid to stop. It's like my life. I'm 68 years old. My wife's dead. I've got all these projects doing. I'm living in a house right now. I'm by myself, like you guys may or may not be. I'm an empty nester, man. I'm afraid to stop, and the boys are afraid to stop. I tell them this all the time. You've got to stop and let me process so I can get you over. I can't get you over saying, ooh, wow, look at that. Oh, man, do you see that? Bullshit. Come on.
Or JR, or get yourself over, because I'll give you an example. Like, I was watching a match that me and Disco had from like 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And it was just an easy, simple, basic, match. But everybody was into the match because when Disco was hitting me, I was just selling, letting him work the crowd, letting the announcer do his thing. Then you know what I'm saying? It was just a real simple psychological match.
Yeah.
Now today, I'll give you an example. I went to the show and I was the manager of this guy, right? And they wanted me to like give him the rub. So during the match, I'm like, hey, bro, turn around and work the crowd. Turn around and work the crowd. And I had to slide into the ring and tell him, and he still didn't do it. And then after the match, I'm like, bro, why weren't you working the crowd? He goes, well, I don't know what you mean. I go, what do you mean you don't know what I mean?
Wow.
Get the crowd with you. First of all, he didn't know what I mean. And then he told me, he goes, I was trying to remember what came next. They're so busy trying to remember what comes next that they forget little things. You know what I'm saying?
They forget. They're trying to remember where to do their leg slaps.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Bro,
yeah. Bro, I know how frustrated. But Jim, the thing about that is though, is as a fan, you're watching that. When you're watching 9 guys on a show slapping their legs, it's like, come on, guys. You know, this looks. It's like you're exposing too much, and we keep trying to get. And as an old school guy, I always get flack. Oh, you're out of touch. This is like, I'm like, guys, there's still some elements of old school wrestling that work, but you guys just don't do it enough. But they still work, and I think the fact that these guys script everything A to Z, literally the whole match from front, top to bottom, and instead of but back in the day, we call a few spots and called mostly the rest in the ring. Because you were trying to feel the crowd and do things that would pop the crowd. Now it's just we always blame, there's always been a lot of blame being placed on creative. The reason wrestling, the creative things creative. I'm like, guys, I'm like, the work isn't helping. There's only a couple guys that really stick out that have that old school and new school mentality figured out together. It's like a lot of you guys just look like you're just going out there and each guy is trying to get his shit in.